ولا تعجل بالقرآن من قبل أن يقضى إليك وحيه وقل رب زدني علما.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، واشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له، واشهد ان محمدا عبده ورسوله. اما بعد. So in the previous lessons we've been going through this particular book, the 6 fundamental principles. We've had a look at the first principle, which was regarding sincerity. We had a look at the second principle also, which was regarding unity. And these are all principles of our religion. These are basic principles of Islam. The principle of sincerity, that all of our worship, all of our ibadah, everything must be done in sincerity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just as the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam mentioned in the hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that indeed all of your actions will be judged in accordance to your intentions. All actions are in accordance to their intentions. So every person will have what they intend. A person intends by way of his worship other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he will receive nothing from that worship. But a person who does his worship sincerely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that is what is desired and that is what we've been commanded with. Then the second principle we moved on to was regarding unity, that Allah has commanded us all to be united upon the religion, united upon the straight path, the path of the Quran and the Sunnah, that one pathway that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam left us upon. As Allah mentioned in the Quran, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Cling on to the rope of Allah, all of you together, and do not split. Clinging on to the rope of Allah, meaning clinging on to that Quran and Sunnah, clinging on to that one methodology that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam left us upon. Today then, we move on to the third principle, which in a way is an extension of the second principle because it is about unity, but this time it is regarding the unity of the subjects with their leader. That the unity occurs in hearing and obeying the rulers. And this is an important point, an important principle of Islam that many people have misunderstood and many people have gone astray over this point of the rulers. And they say upon their emotions, the rulers do this and the rulers do that. The rulers are oppressive and the rulers are this and that. And therefore upon their emotions, they want to rebel and they want to revolt and they want to go out in demonstrations against the rulers. But as we will see here from the evidences of the Quran and the Sunnah, that this behavior of the people is not correct. And what is actually needed is to hear and obey the rulers in obedience to Allah. Of course, there is no obedience if it is disobedience that they are commanding you with, but otherwise hear and obey. So it mentions here al-aslu thalith, the third principle, anna min tamam al-ijtima', that from the completion and the perfection of this unity is as-sam' wa-ta'ah, to hear and obey لمن تأمر علينا ولو كان عبدا حبشيا, to hear and obey whoever is in authority over us, even if it be an Abyssinian slave. To hear and to obey the one who is in authority over us, even if it be an Abyssinian slave. Shaykh al-Fawzan here, he says regarding that point, لأنه لا يتم هذا الاجتماع إلا بطاعة ولي الأمر. That this unity we were talking about in the second principle, it cannot be achieved and completed unless until you have unity upon the obedience to the rulers, to those in authority over you. فَلَا اجْتِمَاعٍ إِلَّا بِإِمَامٍ. So there is no unity except under a leader. Without a leader, without that Muslim ruler, then every clan and every tribe and every group will have their own objectives, and there'll be infighting and there'll be wars and battles between them. Everybody wants power and authority and land, and it's all political gains for each of themselves. So there would be no unity, and that is something seen in reality. In reality, you can see across the world where these types of instances have occurred, the rebellion and the revolts against the rulers, and then afterwards, all of the different factions, all of the different parties, all of them fighting each other, killing each other, they all want power and authority. There is no unity. They don't go and rebel and get rid of the ruler and then suddenly all of them are united. Suddenly, all of them are even more disunited, because now all of them want to fight each other to get that seat which has become vacant. So there is no unity without a ruler. Unity under that Muslim ruler. وَلَا إِمَامَ إِلَّا بِسَمْعٍ وَطَاعَةٍ. So unity cannot be achieved in reality unless until it is under that Muslim ruler. And that unity under the Muslim ruler cannot be achieved unless you hear and obey the Muslim ruler. فَوَلِيُّ الْأَمْرِ الْمُسْلِمِ جعله الله رحمة للمسلمين لإقامة الحدود والأمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر ونصرة المظلوم من الظالم وحفظ الأمن. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the leadership, that there is an imam, that there is a Muslim ruler over the land. This concept of having a Muslim ruler over you in authority, it is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon us. It is a mercy from Allah, this concept in Islam of having that ruler that you hear and you obey, the ruler that will establish the legal punishments, will uphold the laws of the land, that ruler that will ensure that justice occurs, that the boundaries of Allah are maintained, that those deserving of punishment are given their due punishments, that the ruler enjoins the good and forbids the evil, that the ruler aids the oppressed against the one who oppresses, and that the ruler maintains the safety and security of that land. And that is a key point, because everywhere where you see these rebellions and revolts occurring against the rulers, the first thing to disappear is the safety and security of the land. There is no more safety and security. Every party, every group, every faction doing what they want. Roadside bombs here, suicide bombs there. Whatever they want to do, the safety and security of the land that was under the control of the ruler no longer exists. They loot the shops, they break in, they steal, the streets are chaos. There is no more safety and security left. So with the ruler, there is that safety and security. With the ruler, you have that maintained and guarded and preserved, even in situations where a ruler may be deemed an oppressive ruler, and that he is oppressing his people or certain factions of his people, but overall in his land he has the authority, he has the control, then there is safety and security. It's not just going to be roadside bombs everywhere and suicide bombs and looting and stealing and breaking into the shops and chaos that you see. That isn't going to be the case. The ruler may be oppressive, but the kids can go to school in safety, knowing that there isn't going to be, or not expecting there to be, any roadside bomb along the way, not expecting their school to be bombed whilst they are there. The ruler may be oppressive, but you can go to the corner shop and you can get your groceries and you can go home. You can send your kids to the school and they can study and they can come home. You can go to your job, do your job and come home. Have your home in your family, with your family, living in that ease and peace and safety and security, even if it is claimed the ruler is oppressive though, and he's not spreading the wealth into the community, into his country, he's stealing all the wealth for himself. Whatever the claims may be and whatever may be occurring, whatever corruption people may claim and may be occurring, what you have though is a level and a degree of safety and security across the land that is under the authority of a ruler. But when there is no authority of a ruler, the authority has gone, then all of that safety has gone. You cannot even sit in your home safely, because maybe that night a bomb is going to fall on your home. You cannot drop your kids after school in safety. On that route there may be a roadside bomb. So the Shaykh mentions, Shaykh Al-Fawzan, that it is a mercy from Allah that Allah gave us this concept of the rulership and the leadership, that you hear and obey the ruler who is in authority, because one of the purposes of that is that the ruler in authority has and maintains the safety and security of that land. وهذا من رحمة الله عز وجل. والصحابة لما توفي الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم لم يدفنوه حتى بايعوا إمامهم. So this is from the mercy of Allah. And the companions, they knew that full well. They knew the importance of having a ruler, having someone in authority that they hear and they obey, having that rulership. They knew the importance of it, such that it is mentioned when the Prophet ﷺ died, they had not even buried him yet, that they had already given their pledge of allegiance to Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu. recognizing that this was not something you can delay. You cannot live and allow the days and nights to pass and you have no ruler in authority. They gave their pledge of allegiance to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu before they had even buried the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. لأنهم يخشون من الاختلاف ومن الفتنة. They feared that differing may occur between the people and fitna may occur between the people if they didn't have a ruler and authority over the people. They feared that the people may split and differ and that chaos and fitna may occur. So they recognized the importance of establishing a ruler after the Prophet ﷺ passed away. لأنهم يعرفون أنه لا يصلح أن يعيشوا ولا ليلة واحدة بدون إمام. They knew that it wasn't going to work. It wasn't something which was viable to live even a day or a night without having any ruler, any imam. لأن هذا من ضروريات الدين. Because that is from the necessities of the religion. It is a necessity of the religion to have that rulership, to have the Muslim ruler in authority that guards over the subjects, the land, the safety, the security. ولا يمكن أن يكون هذا إلا بالسمع والطاعة لولي الأمر. But the only way you can achieve all of that, having that safety and security and having that maintained within the land, the only way you can have all of that is by hearing and obeying the ruler as we've been commanded to do in the revelation. ولهذا يقول الله عز وجل, and that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم. That O you who believe, obey Allah and obey the messenger and those in authority over you. Surah An-Nisa, number 59. O you who believe, obey Allah and obey the messenger and those in authority over you. The scholars have mentioned this ayah in the Quran is telling us clearly that we must obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we must obey the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, but that we must also obey those in authority over us. And that, in fact, obedience to those in authority over us is an extension of our obedience to Allah and the Messenger. Obedience to the rulers, obedience to those in authority over us is an extension of our obedience to Allah and the Messenger. It is under our obedience to Allah and the Messenger because it is Allah who commanded us in the Quran to obey those in authority over us. It is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Sunnah who commanded us to obey those in authority over us. So obedience to the rulers, it is from your obedience to Allah and the Messenger. And these, or those who are in authority over us, then of course that refers to the rulers, to the Muslim rulers who are in authority over us. And as the scholars have mentioned, even the non-Muslim rulers, that you obey the law of the land, you obey the law of the land that you live in, It is not a case that if you live in a country where the ruler is not Muslim, that this means you do not have to hear and obey, i.e., that you don't have to follow the laws of the land and do what you want. That is what the Khawarij say, and that is incorrect. If you live in a land where the ruler is not Muslim, you still hear and obey, i.e., obey the laws of the land. Obey the laws of the land. The land has particular laws. You're not allowed to do this or that, then obey that. As long as nothing is going against the principles of our religion, then obey and abide by the laws of the land. So here, Allah is telling us to obey the rulers, and those are the rulers in authority over us, the Muslim rulers. And as the scholars have mentioned in the tafsir of this ayah, it is also in reference to the scholars, because the scholars, those people of knowledge, also have an authority over us. They are an authority in the Quran and the Sunnah. They are an authority, a reference point when it comes to the affairs of the religion. So they have an authority over us in that regard. The scholars, the people of knowledge. And Allah told us to return back to them also. To return back to the scholars when we do not know, when we are unsure of an affair. So, Shaykh al-Fawzani mentions, بعد طاعة الله وطاعة رسوله لا بد من طاعة أولي الأمر. That after obedience to Allah and obedience to the Messenger, then it is a must to have obedience to the rulers and those in authority over us from the Muslims. The Muslim rulers, that is the purpose here. And in extension of that, like we said, even if you live in a non-Muslim country, you abide by the laws of the land. Does not mean that you can go and do what you want and the law does not apply to you. Then the author, Shaykh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, rahimahullah ta'ala, said, فبين النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم هذا بيانا شائعا ذائعا بكل وجه من أنواع البيان شرعا وقدرا. That Allah clarified this issue conclusively and sufficiently, that this was something that was clarified by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, clarified by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, both legislatively and in the decree, pre-decreed sense. As Shaykh al-Fawzan, he carries on and mentions some of these evidences, highlighting that we hear and obey the rulers, and that we don't take the methodology of the Khawarij, the Ikhwan al-Muslimin, going out and rebelling and revolting against the rulers. He says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, أوصيكم بتقوى الله والسمع والطاعة وإن تأمر عليكم عبد فإنه من يعش منكم فسيرى اختلافا كثيرا فعليكم بسنتي وسنة الخلفاء الراشدين المهديين. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that I advise you, I order you, I counsel you to have the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Taqwa, it means that you abide by the commandments of Allah upon understanding and evidences, desiring the reward from Allah, and that you stay away from the prohibitions upon understanding, fearing the punishment of Allah. That is taqwa. So here the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam commands us guides us to that taqwa, having that piety and fearing of Allah. And also, was-sam' wa-ta'ah, and also to hear and to obey, i.e. the rulers, because then the Prophet ﷺ says, وَإِن تَأَمَّرَ عَلَيْكُمْ عَبْدٌ, even if a servant comes into authority over you, or a slave comes into authority over you, hear and obey. This is the statement of the Prophet ﷺ. It is not a statement of even a scholar or somebody of knowledge. It is directly the statement of the Prophet ﷺ. Hear and obey, even if a slave comes into authority over you. Because then the Prophet ﷺ said, فَإِنَّهُ مَنْ يَعِشْ مِنْكُمْ فَسَيَرَى اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. Because indeed, whomsoever from amongst you lives long, then you will see much differing. Whomsoever from amongst you lives long, then you will see much differing. Differing occurring between the people, factions and groups and ideologies. You will see that differing. So then what did the Prophet ﷺ tell us to do in that case? فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِسُنَّتِي. When that differing occurs amongst the people, then upon you is to cling to my sunnah. Cling to the guidance. Cling to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and the sunnah of the rightly guided caliphs after the Prophet ﷺ. Al-Khulafa al-Rashidin, those rightly guided khulafa after the Prophet ﷺ. So then Shaykh al-Fawzan says this is the third principle, as-sam' wa-ta'a, hearing and obeying. And he mentions another hadith in al-Bukhari and Ibn Majah and the Musnad of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, اسمعوا وأطيعوا وإن تأمر عليكم عبد. Hear and obey, even if a slave comes into authority over you. Hear and obey, even if a slave comes into authority over you. Statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. فلا يمكن أن تحصل جماعة للمسلمين إلا بولي أمر مسلم ولو لم يكن ذا نسب عربي بل لو كان مملوكا. So it is not possible, the Shaykh says, Shaykh al-Fawzan, he says it is not possible to achieve this unity in its completion unless you have that Muslim ruler in authority that you are united under. That is the completion and perfection of that unity. And it doesn't matter, the Shaykh says, about the specifics of who the Muslim ruler is, whether he is of Arab lineage or not, whether he is a slave, a servant, whether he's a slave, a servant, whomsoever Allah decrees in authority over you, then you hear and obey. And when you look into the books of Aqidah, in some of these slightly longer books, longer than this, then they explain the methods by which a ruler can achieve authority and be considered as the one in authority. So for example, it may be al-istikhlaf, as they say, that the previous ruler passes on and gives the advice and passes on the authority and leadership to somebody else. Before he dies, he passes on and tells the people, such and such will be the ruler after I die. Possible? So then that person who was given that rulership passed on to him becomes the ruler after the death of the current ruler. It could also be through shura, that the current ruler dies, for example, and then the people of knowledge and intellect, those in authority, in status with knowledge, come together and they decide upon who the ruler will be, and they appoint him, and he is then the ruler. It could also be that somebody comes along with substantial power and manages to overthrow a current ruler and take proper and absolute authority over the land. He's got it under his control. He's done it. Got rid of the current ruler with his power and strength, and he has absolutely taken over the country. It's under his authority. Crushed the current rulership and taken over. He is Islamically now considered the ruler. Because if you don't consider him the ruler now that he has actually taken authority, then in that case now, the only way to change that situation is for you to go back out against him and rebel again. Rebel again. He rebelled the first time. Nobody's saying that was legitimate to do. But he's done it. He's taken authority. He's taken absolute control. It's under his authority. Now for you to do anything, it requires rebellion, revolt, a war. Islam says no, don't do that. Because if you do that, where does the cycle stop? You now say, okay, we need to rebel and get back control. So then they rebel and they manage to do it. He then gets his army back and comes back and tries to take it. Where do you stop then? When does that cycle stop? Islam tells us from the very beginning. If it occurs and somebody's taken authority absolutely, then Islamically he's taken the authority. Allow the safety and security of the land to resume. Allow the affairs to settle. Do not cause chaos with a war and a battle and civil war and whatever it may be. So that is mentioned in some of the other books, in the more detailed books of Aqidah. Here, Shaykh al-Fawzan says, or rather, Shaykh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab says in the text, in the next part, ثم صار هذا الأصل لا يعرف عند أكثر من يدعي العلم فكيف العمل به. That this particular issue regarding hearing and obeying the rulers, and some of the narrations and ayat we've seen now, this particular issue, it is unknown and unrecognized and not understood by many people who claim to be people upon knowledge. They claim to have knowledge. They claim to be authorities in religion. But when you ask them about this, all you hear from them is the views of the Khawarij and the Ikhwan al-Muslimin. Rulers this and rulers that, and we need to do something. And it's good the people are speaking up and giving their voice. That is the type of thing you hear from these so-called people of knowledge, these ulama su, as they say, scholars of evil, those who are not scholars upon the methodology of Ahlus Sunnah, the so-called fake scholars, and there are so many of them these days. All you have to do is go onto YouTube and you'll find 100 fake scholars in your first search. All of them claiming knowledge, claiming Islam, claiming to be da'wah this and da'wah that. And the reality, as the Shaykh said from 200 years ago, many people don't understand this. Many of these so-called scholars these days, you ask them about this principle, and all of a sudden, all that comes out is not these evidences, but their emotion. Yes, the ruler is oppressive, and yes, the people, they have a right to voice their concerns and all of the rest of the politics. And the Shaykh said this from 200 years ago, that many of these people who claim knowledge, when it comes to this, they don't know it. They don't know it and they don't recognize it, they don't understand it. What Islam has told us to do comes to rulership for maintaining security and safety, maintaining peace and maintaining that level of ease in the land and comfort in the land and peace in the land. They do not understand it. Rather, all they understand is their emotions, and that is what overcomes so many of the people. Our religion is not based upon emotion. If you follow what is in the revelation that has come from the heavens, revelation that has come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that will give success, not what your emotions and the whisperings of the shaitan tell you. That the ruler has done this and he killed 10,000 people in that genocide and he did this and he did that. We need to rebel, we need to revolt, we need to take him out. And then what? 20, 30 years of war afterwards from your rebellion. Millions of people, refugees, chaos everywhere because you didn't hear and obey, you weren't patient, you didn't practice what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us. The Salaf, one of them, he said, if I had a dua that I knew was going to be answered, if I was told you can make one dua which you're definitely going to get, he said, I would make that dua for the ruler. Not you're told one dua, you can have it, you'll definitely be answered whatever you want. What do you want? People would say, for my family, for wealth, for this, for that. The Salaf, one of them, he said, if I had a dua that I knew would definitely be answered, not for his family, not for his parents, not for his children, not for his ill relative, not for money. He said, I would make that dua for the ruler. Because this is from the fiqh of the Salaf, the understanding of the Salaf. He said, because if I make that one dua which is going to be answered, if in that hypothetical situation, I make it for the ruler, and so the ruler is rectified, the dua is answered, and the ruler becomes a just and rightful ruler, then the consequence of that will be the whole land will be upon that goodness and righteousness, having a pious ruler. Having a pious ruler will bring about goodness for the whole of the land. All of us will benefit, all of the subjects under this ruler if we have a pious ruler. So that one dua, I'll make it for the ruler. That Allah makes him a pious ruler over us. The one who guards over our safety and security, guards over the land and the affairs of the land, guards over the religion and the boundaries of Allah. That is for the benefit of all of the people. Nowadays though, if you were to tell the people that, dua for my family, for my children, for this, for that, the Salaf, they used to say, I'd make dua for the ruler. In fact, nowadays, not only would a person say that I'll make dua for my parents in that case, if it's going to be answered for definite, or for my children. These days, the level of misguidance among some people is such that they'll say, if I know it's definitely going to be answered, then I'll make the dua against the ruler and get it answered. I'll make it against him. Get rid of him. I know the dua is going to be answered, I'll make it against him. That is the way people are these days. But the time of the Salaf, they understood. He said, I would make it for him. Because if Allah rectifies him, that's rectification for all of us under him. So then the Shaykh, he says, صار هذا الأصل لا يعرف عند كثير ممن يدعي العلم فيجهلون مسألة السمع والطاعة وما لها من فضل وما لها من أهمية. So many people, they don't understand this now, and they don't realize the virtue and the benefits and the fruits of this particular point and issue of hearing and obeying the rulers. فكيف بالعوام وهم أشد جهلا في هذا. So if that's so-called people of knowledge, when you ask them, they don't know these affairs properly, these fakes and these frauds, then what therefore of the common people? That's why it's important to return back to the actual scholars, the scholars of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, major scholars upon the Sunnah, the likes of Shaykh bin Baz, Shaykh al-Uthaymeen, Shaykh al-Albani, Shaykh al-Fawzan now, Shaykh Rabi', many of the big scholars upon the Sunnah, the scholars known for their righteousness and for their rectification of affairs in of themselves and for the people, they are the ones that we return to. فَصَارَ الشُّجَاعِ. And this is the point at the end. Shaykh al-Fawzan says, these days, the way the people view this issue, they think that the brave one is the one who can speak out against the regime, the one who can speak out against the tyrannical ruler. That's the brave one. You're upon courage and boldness. This is the way the people think these days. الذي يأمر بالمعروف وينهى عن المنكر عندهم الذي لا تأخذه في الله لومة لائم عندهم هو الذي يخرج على إمام المسلمين. For the people these days, they say, the one who is truly enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, the one who is truly a lion enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, is the one going out against the ruler and dealing with the rulers, dealing with those corrupt rulers, these brave people. And these so-called brave people are the Khawarij, the Ikhwan al-Muslimin. People have viewed it in this way. They are the brave ones. They're speaking up against the ruler. As they say to you now, when their leaders, the leaders of the Khawarij, of the extremists, they are locked up. In Muslim countries, they are locked up. And then these blind followers, they say the real scholars are in jail. The real scholars, the actual brave scholars who stood up against these tyrannical rulers, they got thrown into jail. They are the real scholars who are in jail because of those tyrannical rulers. The reality is they are in jail and they've been locked up, they're in prison because they've gone against the Quran and the Sunnah. They've gone against the Quran and the Sunnah in inciting this rebellion amongst the people, inciting this emotion amongst the people. It's like that Muhammad Arifi, many people heard of him, calling for jihad and jihad this and jihad that, calling for jihad in Syria when it began a few years ago. Big lectures and shouting and screaming and jihad and jihad. And then after he gave these big lectures and big encouragements and jihad, some of the Arab newspaper reporters, they were investigating him. And 2 or 3 days after this huge emotional speech on jihad and inciting the people to rebel and revolt and go fight and do all types of corruption, 2 or 3 days later, some of the reporters, they followed him and he was on a first class seat to London and he was sightseeing around London with a t-shirt on and his shirt open, buttons open. This is a Sheikh Arifi, walking around 2 or 3 days after he's incited all of the youth to go to Syria, to go and cause more and more corruption from the corruption that's already there. And then he's coming and sightseeing as a tourist in London, they said in the newspapers when they caught him. These, they call them Al-Khawarij Al-Qa'diyya. In the books of Aqidah, known as the sitting Khawarij. There are some Khawarij with their swords and guns and they do what they do, they're extremists. There are other types, they are known as the sitting down Khawarij, literally. That they incite people to go out, they incite people to go, that ruler this and that ruler that, and they get everybody worked up and they incite the youth to go out, but they themselves, sitting and relaxing, they won't go anywhere. They won't send their own kids anywhere. Their own sons come, Father, your speech was, I'm gonna go. They say, no, you stay. Don't go there. But they incite the people to go out, known as Al-Khawarij Al-Qa'diyya. So this is the state of affairs of the people upon their blind emotion. that they view those types of people as the courageous, and they are the foolish. They are the ones causing corruption upon the lands. They are the ones inciting the people in opposition to what the Quran and the Sunnah has taught us. وصار حديث المجالس والندوات والمحاضرات في تتبع عثرات الولاة وتفخيمها ونفخ فيها. Sheikh says these days people have seminars and meetings and huge conventions where they talk about the rulers, and it's exactly like that. You go to university campuses and you go to other places and they have big meetings to have a discussion about the state of affairs in this Muslim country or that Muslim country, and the ruler's done this and the ruler's done that, and we need to take action, and we need to have a ballot tomorrow, a vote tomorrow. We need to go we need to go demonstrate on the street against that ruler. They have big meetings and seminars about these issues against the rulers. That's what the Shaykh says, and that is exactly what they do upon their emotions and blind following. So the Shaykh says, حتى يؤول الأمر إلى تفرق الكلمة وتنفير الرعية من طاعة ولي الأمر حتى يختل الأمن وتسفك الدماء. So they'll continue with that incitement, that emotion, until they manage to get the youth, the people, to go out and rebel, and then the blood is spilt. People are killed and murder occurs and killing occurs and looting occurs, corruption and chaos occurs. And that's why the scholars, they say these people are not calling you to jihad. They are calling you to fasad. They are not calling you to any worship or obedience of Allah. They are calling you to corruption. Corruption is what they are calling you to. ويؤول الأمر إلى فساد شد من الفساد الذي يحصل من الصبر على طاعة ولي الأمر. And when they go out and rebel, the chaos that occurs after the rebellion leaves them in a state that is worse than the state that they were in before. And this is evidenced in real life by real testimonies. In many Arab countries, the Arab Spring and all these things they talk about, where rebellions occurred and they went out against the rulers and chaos occurred. In some of those places, years after those rebellions occurred and the chaos occurred and wars occurred and they got rid of their rulers, they went and interviewed people, and many of them said, before it happened, yes, he was a tyrannical ruler and I wanted him out and I was with the rebellion and everything. But now the state we're in, it was better when he was in charge. He was tyrannical, he may have been this, he may have been that, but this, what we're in now, it was better when he was still in charge. And people have said that about rulers who are recognized as the tyrannical rulers of our time. People have said after they were removed, it was better when they were in charge, because at least there wasn't all of this corruption and chaos that they find themselves in after their rebellions and their revolts. Look at all the places where they rebelled. Where is there any example of where they rebelled against their rulers and they even got the rulers out, that afterwards, mashallah, it became a beautiful land of Islam and everybody all beautiful? Where? Not a single place. Every example, that land became more chaos. They got rid of the tyrannical ruler, as they say, and then the whole situation became even more tyrannical. Those people who were all apparently united to get rid of this oppressive ruler, after they got rid of him in the name of Islam and jihad, as they claimed, now all of a sudden they're all fighting and killing each other in the name of Islam and whatever else they claim. That's why the scholars, they advise time and time again, do not think that there is jihad in these places. Syria and Iraq and all scholars, they advise, do not go there. Do not participate. Do not support the activities that are occurring there. This is not jihad. This is corruption going on in those lands. Muslims, they're fighting each other in those lands. Do not think it is the oppressive ruler they are all fighting against. It is corruption going on in these places. Corruption by these people who do not understand and follow the laws of Islam. They cause corruption under the name of Islam, under the name of jihad. inciting the youth and the youngsters to go out and support that upon their emotions. Muslims are being killed and the women are this and children are being killed. All these emotions they use to take the people out into more and more corruption. That's why the scholars, they advised from the beginning to now, don't get involved in that Syria thing and Iraq and these places. Don't support that. It's not jihad. Don't go out there. If anybody does any of that, or they get involved in those activities, report them. Scholars have said, report them to the kafir authorities. You know somebody who's got a mentality of extremism and you consider and you see that they are to that level where they might do something, then go and report them. Report them to the police, report them to the authorities. Fatwa of the Salafi scholars. Because tomorrow if they do go and do something and they kill all these innocent people, then that is haram. Haram. Whether it's Muslims they kill, non-Muslims they kill. Islam has never sanctioned this. Therefore it is permissible. Not only permissible, it is required that you go and report them if you know of extremists planning to do things. So this is the third principle. The principle of unity under the Muslim rulership, not rebellion and revolt and demonstration against them, causing chaos and corruption. To be united and to be patient. There are narrations where the Prophet ﷺ said, even if the ruler beats your back and takes your wealth, even if they are like that, even if they are oppressive like that, be patient. Recognize what the Quran and the Sunnah has told you. In patience will maintain that level of security and safety and goodness. But rebellion and revolt, you've seen it with your own eyes. The corruption that it brings about afterwards. That is the ways of the Ikhwan al-Muslimin, the ways of the Khawarij, the ways of ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all of these different groups, causing and inciting all of this emotion and false banners of jihad and using the name of Islam, or rather abusing the name of Islam. So be aware of these principles and what the religion teaches us. That brings us to the end of the third principle. Inshallah ta'ala, the next session we will begin with the fourth principle. And the fourth principle in a way connects to some of what we've been talking about. The fourth principle is how to identify who the real scholars are then. How to identify what the real correct knowledge and understanding of Islam is and who the real scholars are. How to identify that so that you can make sure you remain upon that straight path. And that's a question many people will ask all these different groups out there. How do I know which ones are right? Tablighi say one thing, Ikhwani say one thing, these say one thing, those say one thing. How do I know where to go and what to follow? So next time, in next class, we'll have a look at that. And inshallah ta'ala, after that class, it should become clearer as to where the truth is and what that revelation is that Allah sent to us and the Prophet ﷺ taught us. So that is where we'll round off for today then. And we'll resume then in that next session with the fourth principle. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.